Roush Fenway Racing might be returning to the Truck Series in 2022. Karam will make his NASCAR debut in the Xfinity Series for Jordan Anderson Racing at the Indianapolis Road Course. And NBC Sports might, in the foreseeable future, put some of the races on the next TV contract on Peacock. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We got a lot of NASCAR stories to discuss here today on the channel. Let's go just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off with Josh Berry. As Josh Berry this past weekend won the 13th annual Hampton Heat at Langley Speedway this past Saturday night. I'm not sure who he passed at around 37 laps ago. He took the lead with 37 laps ago, and he was able to lead the rest of the way and score the victory in the Hampton Heat. I'm not very surprised that he won the event. To be honest with you, I picked him coming into the event to win because he's a really good late model driver with how good he's been in Xfinity. He basically went back to his roots and was able to win that event. It's really cool to see that Josh Berry was able to win that event. I hope that he can run it because I know he's supposed to run later this week as well, maybe tomorrow or Wednesday. I'm not exactly sure when he's supposed to race again. But I think it's really cool that Josh Berry was able to go out and win the 13th annual Hampton Heat. And hopefully he'll win the next race he races at as well, the throwback race, Throwback 276 at Hickory Speedway. Hope he'll be able to go out and win that event. And I'm wishing the best of luck in that event as well. But it's really cool to see that Josh Berry was able to win the Hampton Heat at Langley Speedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell also won this past weekend. He won the ASCO City All-Star Circuit of Champions race at Lake Ozark Speedway. And not only did he win the race, he won it in dominating fashion, leading a majority of the laps and scoring the victory in that event. It surprised nobody that Christopher Bell won that event. Christopher Bell is a really good sprint car and dirt racer as well, along with how good of a NASCAR driver he is. He's also a really good sprint car and dirt racer as well. And I think it's no surprise he's really good in these events. He's been able to go out and I don't know if he's won any other All-Star Circuit of Champions races in the past, but it was really cool to see he was able to go out there and win at Lake Ozark Speedway, and it was awesome to see that because it's great to see the NASCAR representation going out and winning this weekend, and great to see that Christopher Bell was able to win at Lake Ozark Speedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Taylor Gray. Taylor Gray is expected to run a partial Truck Series schedule for DJR Racing in 2022. Now, Taylor Gray, for a lot of you don't know, was supposed to run quite a few Truck Series races this year as he turned 16. He was expected to run quite a few Truck Series races in 2021. However, he was involved in a motorcycle accident earlier this year, and he's been making his Truck Series debut in a couple weeks at Watkins Glen. Actually, next week, as a matter of fact, he'll be making his Truck Series debut at Watkins Glen, but he's expected to run a partial truck schedule in 2022. Now, how many races he's going to run is a question. I would assume he'll probably run some of the road course races that are on the Truck Series schedule next year, and I would assume that he'll probably run all the short tracks under 1 mile since he's not 18 years old at the moment. He can't run tracks that are bigger than 1 mile except the road courses. So I would assume that Taylor Gray is going to run a lot of the short tracks for the number 17 car and probably with some of the road course races to get a little bit more experience. I'm very intrigued to see his debut, though, in a couple weeks at Watkins Glen. So I'm really intrigued to see how he's going to do. I think he'll do very well. Honestly, I think a top 20, top 25 event would be very solid for a driver making his debut. And I'm looking forward to that for sure to see how Taylor Gray is going to do in his Truck Series debut. And really good to see that he'll probably be making some Truck Series starts next year as well. Probably what he's supposed to do this year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Barstool Sports. It was reported this past weekend, this last Friday, by Adam Stern, that Barstool Sportsbook is looking at building a permanent retail sportsbook location at Phoenix Raceway as soon as next year as part of their new deal. These deals typically see the property, in this case NASCAR, get $4 to $8 billion annually from the sportsbook and share in bet revenue. This is really big. Barstool Sports is one of the biggest companies out there, especially for sports and stuff. It's one of the biggest publications. It's one of the biggest things out there at the moment. And they will bring a lot of eyes and a lot of ears onto the sport. Once again, Barstool Sports has had a past relationship with NASCAR really up until this past year. Dave Portnoy has not really been at the track due to the pandemic. It's one of the reasons why they kind of backed out earlier this year. That being said, they've been starting to have their little bit more of their presence back in the sport over the last year. And the fact that there looks like that they're going to have they might even get a partnership in the future for betting. I'm not exactly sure. But number one, Barstool Sports is going to bring a lot of eyes onto the sport. Number two, money comes into the sport, and the more money that NASCAR can get, especially for eventually the new TV deals, also the better it is going to be. It's going to be good business for the sport overall, and the fact that Barstool Sports is getting back into NASCAR is really, really awesome. See, I'm definitely excited about this for sure, because the fact that we may have another big company come back into the sport and more people coming into it is really great to see, and glad to see that Barstool Sports is looking to build a location at Phoenix Raceway and have a huge up. This was talked about last week, but it was reported by NASCAR, and it's really, really good that this is in the talks currently at the moment for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about North Wilkesboro. We're also talking about the SRX as well. Basically, someone from the SRX kind of basically asked if North Wilkesboro was potentially interested in coming on their schedule for 2022. Now, North Wilkesboro is one of the most historic racetracks in the history. If you look at NASCAR, it was one of the inaugural tracks that's been around since around 1949, and then it was around back in up till 1996, and then they basically lost their races due to them moving that race to Texas Motor Speedway, because basically the guy that ran at the time, Eddie Gossage, wanted a race there in 1997, and Bruce have also brought a race there in 1997 as well. Now, North Wilkesboro, the last time they actually had a race at that track was around 2010 or 2011. Chase Elliott, I believe, won one of the last races at North Wilkesboro when they last raced there. But over the last year or two, the track's basically been sitting rumble for the last 10 years. That being said, over the last year or two, there has been a lot of push. I think a lot of it is due to that iRacing event. There has been a lot of push, and Marcus Smith did say that he was very interested in getting that track basically opened up. And Marcus Simonis, the CEO of Camping World, said he pledged $1 million to basically get that track running back up as well. And that's another thing, the SRX has a major partner, that being Camping World. So I think that's another big thing that's really helping this for. Now, also about a couple months ago, it was reported that Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, was going to basically be pledging $10 million, $30 million each to 3 racetracks. Each track would get $10 million each. That being North Wilkesboro, that being Rockingham as well, and that would also be going to Charlotte as well for upgrades and renovations as well. That $10 million will not fix exactly everything, but it's going to get the track basically at least in racing condition. And the fact that North Wilkesboro might be coming back for the first time in nearly over a decade is really great to see. I really would like to see North Wilkesboro come back on the SRX schedule. It would get a lot of new eyes onto the racing facility, see the really great racing that did happen there in the 1980s and 90s, even the 70s as well. And I would really like to see this come back to racing in general. And maybe if this does really well, maybe this will be enough of a push for NASCAR to eventually return there, because like I said, there is talk eventually that we could be going there. And it's going to be a few years for the track is even ready to go, but the fact that there's a very strong possibility that North Wilkesboro could be at least on the SRX schedule is definitely really, really exciting overall, because the more that people and support that can get for a series, the better it is, and the SRX is becoming one of the most popular series. And if it airs a new track that is at a schedule, they already send a schedule, I definitely think that this is the track to add to your schedule to bring more eyes and ears onto the sport. And this is really good that there's potentially that this track could be coming on the schedule in the foreseeable future. And now we're going to jump into the first of 3 major stories of today's episode, as we are talking about NBC Sports. Now, I want to give a little bit of backstory before we get into the NBC Sports contract. We're going to talk about the IndyCar contract. IndyCar this past week and signed last week basically announced a multi-year extension with NBC Sports, where 13 of the races are going to be on NBC, 2 races are going to be on Peacock, and the other races are going to be on USA Network. The reason that this contract, I think, is really, really big for IndyCar is because of the fact, like I said, that 13 races, a majority of the IndyCar schedule, is going to be on there. It's the most races that IndyCar's races that are going to be on the schedule in a very, very long time. Even before the split in 1995, there were less races on CBS that are going to be on this deal. So we are getting a massive, massive deal for the IndyCar schedule. The reason we're bringing up IndyCar is because this has a lot to entail with this. Let's talk about this. So basically someone asked in regards to the NBC contract and asked, what's in it? Are you potentially thinking about in your next TV contract potentially moving it up to basically moving some of the races up to Peacock? And this is what John Miller said. He said, that might be down the road. We haven't gotten to that yet because our deal is not up for several years with them. I would assume and have every reason to think that they will want to be a part of the NBC Sports family that are all existing on Peacock. Now, for a lot of you don't know, the NBC contract with NASCAR goes to the 2024 season, so we do have a few years until the NBC Sports deal officially ends, at least on this current contract deal with 2024. And we're within a year or two of potential negotiations starting. There is potential that negotiations could be starting as early as the late end of next year. So there's potential those contract negotiations are going to be starting. And honestly, I would like to maybe see NBC Sports take over for the whole year. I think Fox, honestly, they do not care about NASCAR. So if NBC Sports was to take over for the whole entire year, honestly would not overall have a problem with that. But I think the reason a lot of people are looking at this is because of the fact that potentially some of the races could end up on Peacock, and that is a streaming service, and people don't want to pay for things behind a paywall. And I do think that if any races, if it does come true to Peacock does become a place for NASCAR races, I would think that there would be a lot less people that would be watching the event. I would think maybe 50 to 100,000, if they're lucky, would be watching those events. So that wouldn't be great overall on that front. But I do think that the only way this will work, and I will say this, if Peacock is to get involved in this, the only way that this will work, in my honest and sincere opinion, the only way that this will work is you cannot have any of the races on USA Network. Remember, NASCAR NBC is shutting down at the end of this year. But you can only be able to have, in my opinion, no races on USA Network. You cannot have any races on cable, because the only reason that this will work is none of the races on cable, because Peacock is supposed to be a place where you get everything. Now, more on an IndyCar contract. IndyCar basically is getting all the stuff commercial free, and that's another thing. None of the races on Peacock would have to be commercial free as well. Everything would have to be commercial free. They would have to be. No exceptions. You cannot have races that have commercials with them if they're going to be on your streaming service. I don't think that would make a ton of sense to have commercials on your streaming service, since IndyCar is going to have that overall. Again, we have a few years till the TV contracts are official, so keep in mind anything could change. And this is kind of and they're just thinking about it currently at this point, but there is a very strong possibility that this could happen. We'll have to keep an eye on the story as time goes on with the TV deals. But if I had to choose, I'd like to see a full season from NBC, and I don't know what the deal would end up being, but we'll have to wait and see for sure what the deal is going to be going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we are talking about Sage Karam. Sage Karam is making his NASCAR debut in a couple weeks at the Indianapolis Road Course, driving the number 31 for Jordan Anderson Racing. Sage Karam has raced in 24 career IndyCar races. He just this past year raced in the Indianapolis 500 and ended up finishing 7th for Dry Arrival Racing. He's also had a lot of experience with Chip Ganassi Racing in past. Well, that's the only time he ran full-time. I think it was in 2015. He ran full-time for Chip Ganassi Racing with a pretty solid season overall, with 1 podium so far in his IndyCar career. He has a lot of road course racing experience, and I think that this is one of the big reasons why Jordan Anderson Racing has overall decided to pick him up. I'm really excited about this for sure. I'm a huge fan of Sage Karam. I think the guy is a very, very solid driver. Well, like I said, a lot of that road course experience I think is going to play a huge part in how Sage Karam is going to perform. Now, my big question is, how well do I think Sage Karam will perform in making his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut, since he doesn't have a lot of experience? He is going to have practice qualifying that is overall going to be a big benefactor. I do think that he will need practice qualifying to get a little bit up to speed in these cars. Like I said, he's a very, very good road course racer, but I think that you'll need a little bit of that experience in practice, and I think that he'll pick it up very, very quickly, because he does have experience in Indianapolis road course in his past, and he also experienced at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway a lot as well with the Dry Arrival Racing team and the Chip Ganassi Racing team as well. So to me, I think that Sage Karam is going to bring a lot to the table for Jordan Anderson Racing. I think that practice qualifying is going to be a big factor. Now, if he can stay out of the wrecks and be really, really quick to get up to speed, I would not be surprised to see this car potentially finish in the top 10 or top 15. I think that this car is very capable of that. We've seen Josh Berry be able to get top 10s in this car. Tyler Reddick get top 10s in this car. We've seen a lot of drivers race in this car that have been very successful. And that's one thing I talk about Jordan Anderson Racing's business model as well. Jordan Anderson Racing has had a lot of different drivers. I feel he's, of course, has raced for his own team, but he's had drivers like Tyler Reddick get behind the wheel, Josh Berry get behind the wheel, Kaz Grala, and now an IndyCar driver like Sage Karam get behind the wheel. I think this also is a thing that's happening, is we're seeing a little bit of an IndyCar resurgence in NASCAR as well. Is you have currently Santino Ferrucci, who's racing a lot of races for Samhat Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and has been pretty solid over there. You have James Davison, who is racing 26 out of the 36 races all together this year, and potentially could go full-time next year in the Cup Series if he wants to. You also have potentially Mark Andretti maybe coming over. He's been working on an Xfinity Series deal. Not sure where he'd be driving at the moment, but he's been talking about getting into the Xfinity Series. And now you have another IndyCar driver that is coming over to the Xfinity Series to race in the Indy Road Course. And if he does very well, does he maybe get more races and does more of the schedule up? He says he's a big fan of NASCAR and he's kind of wanted to race in stock cars. If he does well enough, will this mean he gets more opportunities going forward to race for other organizations? That's going to be a big question going forward. If he does really, really well at the Indianapolis Road Course, I think that he'll get a very good opportunity to maybe run more races for Jordan Anderson Racing. Maybe in the future, if it does come available, maybe this car becomes available for him to run full-time. We'll have to wait and see, because like I said, he does have that experience, but we'll have to wait and see what happens, but I'm really excited about this for sure. I love that we're seeing more IndyCar drivers that are getting involved with this. This was reported about a week ago because his dad was trying to get sponsorship for him. I think it's really cool to see we got another IndyCar driver that is getting involved, and I'm happy about this because I want to see more representation for motorsports, crossover in different motorsports, like NASCAR drivers maybe going over to Indianapolis 500 maybe in the future, or IndyCar drivers coming over to NASCAR, or maybe NASCAR drivers going to other things. The fact that we're getting more crossover, more drivers are coming out and trying new things, I love it. I love the crossover and the representation. And are we maybe going to see more IndyCar drivers come over to the NASCAR run, the Xfinity Series, or in the Cup Series races in the foreseeable future? We'll have to wait and see, but I think that this is really cool that there's potential where you see Sage Karam racing in the Xfinity Series and making his NASCAR debut. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we are talking about Roush Fenway Racing. There was a Reddit post that was basically put up in regards that there hasn't been a Cup Series team in a very long time that has raced in the Truck Series. Brad Keselowski responded that he basically said that he wants to change that this year. However, what he mentioned was he wants to do it, but with the right partnerships and branding to back him up going forward. Now, Dawson Cram basically responded that, and he said he's interested in getting involved that as well. Now, to give a backstory on Roush Fenway Racing's history in the Truck Series, Roush Fenway Racing started in the Truck Series in 1995, but the last time that Roush Fenway Racing was in the Truck Series was back in 2009 with Colin Braun, and that's when the Roush Development Program was going on at the time. You did have Roush Development after that, but you didn't have a Truck Series team to basically develop with that at that current moment. So the last time they raced in the Truck Series in 2009. Brad Keselowski did mention during the press conference that he would like to bring not only back the Xfinity Series program as well, but the Truck Series program as well. He wants the right partnerships. Now, my big question is, would some of those partnerships with Brad Keselowski, because remember, Brad Keselowski does have that team ownership experience where he basically owned a Truck Series team for a very, very long time. When his dad basically owned a team originally when he opened up in 1985, and then he owned the team from like 2011 up until 2017. He brought a lot of development into the series as well. Drivers like Ross Chastain, Austin Cindric, Tyler Reddick, Daniel Hemmer. Quite a few drivers came from that development as well. And that's a couple of things why I think this makes sense. Number one, Team Penske has no development right now. They don't have anybody in their development program currently at the moment, as Austin is going to be going full-time next year, and expected Cup Series drivers are basically going to be taken over on that front going forward in the foreseeable future. And I'll tell you, I'm extremely excited about this. But the second reason I think that this makes sense is it would potentially get Ford more development going forward in the Truck Series. The more development you can get for Ford, the better. Right now, Ford's development program is really, really small at the moment. You have Chase Briscoe, who's up in the Cup Series right now. He's no longer in that development program. He's jumped up to the highest point, so he's no longer in that development program. You have Voss Cindric, who's part of the Ford development program, but he's going full-time at Cup next year in the number 2 car for Team Penske, so he's going to be out of the equation. So the drivers that you have remaining technically in the Ford development program, you have Riley Herbst, who in my opinion has been absolutely terrible with Stewart-Haas Racing. I can see him out of that car, honestly, at the end of this year with how bad he's performing. He's not done really, really good. You have Haley Deegan, who drives one in the Truck Series, and I think that she has potential to be good, but let's be honest, she hasn't overall been really that impressive in her Truck Series starts. I know that she's a rookie this year, but I even look back at her dirt racing starts, and I thought that she was going to be really, really good. And in both those truck starts, she absolutely struggled, never cracked top 15 of those races, and she did really good in her heat, but she absolutely struggled there. And she's had some good runs in other tracks. You look back at Kansas, where she ended up potentially finishing, I think, outside the top 10, but almost got a top 10 in that event. She was running well Texas for a speeding penalty, so she has time to develop. I just think that practice qualifying will get her a little bit better, but she has been absolutely impressive. You do have Tanner Gray, who I think is a very, very good driver, but again, I think he needs a little bit more experience as well. I mean, he's a guy that's won the NHRA championship, so he's really came from that, and he's only been racing in NASCAR stock cars overall since around 2019, so I think he needs a little bit more experience. where I think he could be a very, very good driver. You do also have Todd Gillen, who I think could be in the future a driver that could be a candidate for this ride in the foreseeable future. I think Todd Gillen is a very, very talented driver. He's basically, I'm not sure if he's 100% in the Ford development program, but he's part of the DGR team, so I'd assume he's part of the Ford development program. I think Todd Gillen has overall been really, really good this year. So I think it'd be good eventually, especially for Ford development, you get some people that are in the Toyota, if they really, really struggle to stay in the Toyota, drivers that are bring as much money, maybe they can be brought over to the Ford development side of things. You could get a lot more of that Ford development going forward as well. Now, for the first year, I would think if they are to go in the Truck Series next year, what driver do I think that they pick up? There's one driver in particular that I would really, really like to see be the driver that they choose, and that driver is Grant Enfinger. I think Grant Enfinger is absolutely an incredibly talented driver. He's been really, really good. Unfortunately, this year, he's been basically splitting a ride with Christian Eckes this year in the Truck Series of Thor Sport Racing. He's been driving a lot of races for CRI Motorsports. He has been basically in the top 5 in points this year. Despite missing a race, he has been in the top 5 in points all year long, around the 3rd or 4th position in points. He's running really, really consistent, really, really well, and has shown a lot of speed. And despite not running a lot of the races for Thorsport, he's already been the best Thorsport driver this year to ride in those trucks. I know that Ben Rose has 2 wins this year, but he's been absolutely consistent. I think consistency is a major, major factor if you're going to run really, really well or not. So Grant Enfinger, I think, brings a lot. One, he brings a lot of ownership. He brings a lot of experience to the table. Like I said, he's been in the racing Truck Series for a very, very long time, for about 4 or 5 years. So he's been in the Truck Series for quite some time. And number 2, the big thing is sponsorship. I'm not sure how he's doing on sponsorship right now, so I think that's a big thing that is affected. But I think he brings a little bit of funding. So you could bring some of that funding over from Thorsport, maybe over and work with the BKR team, especially if Brad is able to get some of those partners. Number 3, guy that's a championship caliber driver. I think he's absolutely a championship caliber driver and could bring a lot to the table going forward. I think that he definitely should be the choice. I think he'd be a really good selection. I think that he should be the guy that is chosen to be the driver for Roush Fenway Racing if they are to go to the Truck Series in 2022. So, hopefully that does happen. Man, the fact that Roush could come back next year is really, really awesome. I really do hope it happens. I think it'd be really, really big for the Truck Series overall, for an older team to make its return, and more teams in the Truck Series, the better it's going to be overall, in my honest opinion. Well, alright, that's going to be for today's NASCAR news video. Well, thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Support page on the link description below for that, and comment with your thoughts on today's video. Do you think Roush Fenway Racing will be making its return to the Truck Series in 2022? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about potentially some of the other stories discussed here today on the channel? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR and SRX content. Take care, everybody.